I never really was a great believer in oval or elliptical chainrings. I remember the Biopace by Shimano back in the 80s, but I also remember the controversy around it. And I guess I've never really bothered to actually, carefully look into the science of ovals or elliptical chainrings. And ever since my good friend Dr. Fonda from the Performance Center sent me some absolute black elliptical chainrings, I've been testing them for the last couple of months, and I'll be honest, I'm a bit surprised. I'm not one to go with the hype, or I'm very unbiased, and I usually try to remain unbiased and skeptical until I see some good evidence, or that supports the theory. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to have a look at these elliptical chainrings from Absolute Black, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to mount them, and then hopefully I'll have a treat closer to the end of the video for you guys. So yeah, this is my bike, and these are the Absolute Black elliptical chainrings that Dr. Fonda sent me. And what I want to do today is to talk a little bit about elliptical chainrings, and I want to call Dr. Fonda so he can explain what are the drawbacks and the benefits of using these chainrings as opposed to using the more conventional round chainrings. I also want to talk to you about how easy it was for me to actually install these chainrings. I am not a particularly inclined mechanical person, but it was very, very easy to install them. So we're going to have a look at that as well. So yeah, like I said, I'm not a mechanic, I'm not a bike mechanic, and I'm not even a particularly mechanically inclined person. I mean, I don't change bottom brackets or replace brake fluids every day, twice a day, like a mechanic does. So it came as a surprise to me how easy it was for me to change my old chainrings to these ones. And this is very much the case where if I can do it, believe me, so can you. Obviously there's a lot of different systems out there, and mine is a standard Shimano Ultegra R8000 system. And so if you have an Ultegra system, this video is going to be right for you. But even if you don't have a Shimano system, this video can be useful in a lot of different ways, and it can help you in a lot of different ways, because after I've shown you how easy it is to replace these, I'm going to call Dr. Fonda, and we're going to have a little chat about the elliptical chainrings. So let me show you the tools you need for this job, because you really don't need to go to a mechanic for this. And I mean, this is it. And it's really simple. You don't need many tools. You need a number 5 Allen key. You need a number 2 Allen key to adjust the front derailleur. And you need a T30 or a number 3 Torx key. And that's it. The only specialty tool that you need is this £2 dust cap removal for the Shimano dust cap crank arm on the other side of that, and that's it. You really don't need anything else. So if you have a set of Allen keys and a set of Torx keys, that's it, you're sorted. So let's have a look at how you replace your old chain set with your new Absolute Black chain set, because this is one of the things that surprised me the most, because it was really easy to do. So step number 1 is to remove the dust cap, and it's as simple as that. You just use the Shimano tool and you just unscrew the dust cap. It shouldn't be that tight at all. Next, what you do is you use your number 5 Allen key and you just undo the screws on the crank. Don't forget to lift up that little locking plate that holds the crank in the axle. And now it's just a matter of tapping a little bit on the axle so it can come out on the other side. You don't need great force at all for this. Just a gentle tap. You don't need a specialty hammer. You can just wrap a towel or use use a shoe or something like that. It should be really fairly easy to come out. Then you go over to the other side and you pull it out. Obviously it was a bit harder for me because I had the camera in one hand, but this is fairly straightforward. And as you can see, I just took out an entire Shimano crank set without a single issue. This really isn't rocket science, and you shouldn't be afraid of trying this because it's fairly simple. And if I can do it, you can do it too. Now you need to remove the screws holding the chain rings to the crank. They should come out fairly easy as well because you don't need a lot of torque to tighten these up. Before I actually remove the rings, I made a little mark on the rings and cranks so I know in the future how these align together. Now it's just a matter of sliding the rings off the crank and you're all good. It's time now to open the elliptical chain rings by Absolute Black. Before sending them to me, Dr. Fonda asked me which chain rings I was using because obviously you need to be careful to choose the ones that you've been using. So mine are 50-34 as you can see, so if you want to pick the ones that you are used to, you need to buy the correct option. The Absolute Black will come with screws and covers that you need to install them. These covers are a specific shape, so you will only fit a specific hole on the chain ring, so you don't have to worry about putting the screw in the wrong place because they won't fit. So there's no mistakes here. To install the rings in the crank arm is very easy as well, especially because the chain rings are cut in a way that will only fit in a certain way because of the cut of the crank arm, so it really couldn't be easier. After you put these little covers, you hold them in place and now it's time to put the screws back on. You really don't need to tighten these that much, but make sure that they're not loose. It's as simple as that. You now have a complete chain set with elliptical chain rings. The only thing you need to do now is to put the axle back in the bottom bracket and adjust the front derailleur. I've put a little dab of grease in the axle just in case, but as you can see this is a fairly simple process and you really don't need any special tools, just the Torx and the two Allen keys that I mentioned in the beginning. So now it's time to put everything back together. Getting the axle back in the bottom bracket is fairly simple as well. You just need to get the chain around the axle and slide it in. Then you need to turn your bike around and all you need to do is put your crank arm on this side back in and finally put the dust cap back on. So now comes the hardest bit, I thought, of this whole process, and that is to adjust the front derailleur. The reason you need to adjust the front derailleur is that now the derailleur is too low and it will hit the chain rings at the major or at the longest axis of the chain rings. If you already know how to adjust the front derailleur, this should be straightforward for you. But at this point, I should really mention Absolute Black's YouTube channel because they have a fantastic video specifically on how to adjust the front derailleur for your elliptical chain rings. But in essence, you need to first unscrew the derailleur cable and let it loose so that you can lift up the derailleur itself. Then you need to adjust the front derailleur using the high and low screws, and this is where you should really go check out Absolute Black's video, which will be down in the description. And that's it, you're ready to use them. It's very simple, it's very easy. This whole process took me about 2 hours, but I'm the sort of person who likes to take its time and I'd like to pause and go and make a cup of tea. So it's really accessible. Let me now just show you the quick talk I had with Dr. Fonda where he explained a little bit how the Absolute Black chain rings can help you in your cycling. Hi Varud, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thanks for the invite, Nuno.
It's all right, no worries. We had this exchange of conversations about the ovals, and you sent me a couple of ovals, right? and I've been trying them for the last month, and now I just wanted to talk to you and ask you a couple of questions, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, so for those who never tried ovals, can you explain a little bit what the benefits are compared to circular rings?
Yeah, sure. Now, let's start with humans first. When we think about power production during cycling, a very good analog to that is actually a squat. For example, when you do a squat, at some point, you're actually much stronger than at other points. So when you're all the way down, you cannot produce that much force, and you cannot lift that much weight as you can do it when you're more extended. And that actually has a lot to do with a relationship that we call muscle force length relationship. So basically, when the muscle is optimally covered, the actin and myosin fibers, that's where the muscle is the strongest. And this is exactly the same deal on the bike. At some point of the crank cycle, you produce most of the power. Now, it's not that simple. The power is actually a result of several factors. One, obviously the most important one, is the muscular force. And this one peaks, if it would be isokinetically, at around 90 to 100 degrees crank cycle, so just past 3 o'clock crank position. Mm-hmm. But we cannot neglect, because it plays quite a big role, is the inertia. That's why everything shifts to more later on to the crank. And so an average person on a road bike peaks with its power or force production at around 110 degree cycle. Now, our oval chainrings from Absolute Black are designed to actually meet these characteristics. Essentially, that means that it's basically similar to the power production you do with your body. It goes well in parallel with the shape of the chainring. So basically, where you're the strongest, the chainring is the biggest. Where you can produce the least force on the pedals and crank, the chainring is the smallest. And that essentially means that it kind of adapts to your riding style.
Yeah. So it kind of adapts to that length-tension relationship you're just telling me about.
Exactly, and the inertia both.
And so should we consider that all ovals are the same, or is that is there a particular difference from Absolute Black to the other kind of manufacturers of ovals?
Yeah, so let's not call them all ovals, because some of the non-circular chainrings are actually not oval, they're ellipse. And they vary massively. And if we start at the beginning, when it all started, I think it was 1984 or 87 when Shimano launched BioPace. Not sure if you remember those. Those were actually for 90 degrees shifted to what we are, completely the opposite. So their belief at Shimano was that where you cannot produce as much force, to make the chainring bigger, which essentially should allow you to produce force. Now, that actually resulted in a lot of people getting injured, especially the knees, because it put a lot more load, a lot more strain on the knees. And then if you go to other brands that I don't want to mention by name, they vary massively both in shape. So as I said, some are centric, some are oval, some are not a complete 100% ellipse, whilst Absolute Blacks are. And the second one, which I think is actually the most important one, is the timing. The timing, we mainly refer to what's the crank position when the chainring is the biggest. Mm-hmm. And in average, our road chainrings, they peak around 110 degree crank cycle, whereas some actually peak at around 70. Because when they designed those, they only looked at where the knee is peaking with its power production, which is actually somewhere between 70 and 90. But they've neglected the inertia and the other joints, which also contribute to the end power output. So no, ovals are definitely not all the same. There are some brands who basically almost copied the design from Absolute Black and are very similar. But there are also other characteristics of chainrings that make our chainrings special and probably the best in the world.
Mm-hmm. And do we have any pro riders riding elliptical or oval chainrings?
So there's a very big problem in World Tour cycling, and it's called actually sponsorship issues.
Okay, I see.
If you look at Pro Tour teams, almost every single team is sponsored by one of the drivetrain manufacturers.
Sure.
And in their contracts, obviously, it's that. Now, we do work with a few teams, and I can say that now currently there are several Pro Tour riders testing our oval chainrings in complete confidence, so away from the media and marketing. Mm-hmm. And I can assure you that now we have problems because those riders don't want to go back to round, which happens.
And so they will have a conflict with a sponsor.
Exactly. So we are working very hard to gain more teams for next year to negotiate out contracts which will leave them just to chainrings out of the contract. But if we look one step down, there are few teams. There's few individual riders in Pro Continental racing and Continental racing who are using daily for years oval chainrings. It's a different picture in mountain biking. If we leave out the very, very best cross-country riders who are, again, sponsored by drivetrain manufacturers, there's almost like 30% people in cross-country using oval chainrings.
Yeah, because they're free to choose.
Exactly, because they can use whatever they buy, yes.
Yeah. So from talking to competitive cyclists, I gather that the main issue is that they are a bit reluctant to use them in races because of the dropping of the chain. And if you're not careful with changing gears, you can drop the chain. Did you ever have any accidents with this? Do you have any experience? Did you ever? Because I know you ride ovals as well. Did you ever drop the chain at all? I mean, I've been trying these for the last couple of months, and I've never dropped the chain. But I'm a bit meticulous. Setting up my gears, and I don't usually like to use the big ring and having a completely crossed chain.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is an issue. I don't know if the pro riders that you've been assisting tell us a little bit more about this.
Yeah. So obviously, pro riders are the best test bunnies because they can test it to the extreme. So we're speaking standing starts to maximum sprinting, accelerations, and also changing gears in very steep uphill. So there are a lot of power. So far, if you adjust the front derailleur correctly, you will not experience any issues. I can guarantee you that. We did have some issues not dropping the chain when changing from one to another, but there was an issue that I remember. It's not a pro rider who dropped the chain from the big chain ring and just fell down. But it was not an issue in the chain ring. It was actually the issue in the frame manufacturer and a loose bottom bracket, and the whole chain ring was, the whole crankset was moving left to right. So that
could have happened with normal chain rings as well.
Exactly. It would happen with the normal chain ring as well. In terms of shifting, there was some concern with some other manufacturers, but this is something that we've patented and we designed to perfection. If you look at our chain ring from the inside, you will see that the recess that grab the chain and bring the chain to the big chain ring from the small to the big one, there's 6 of those, and they are positioned perfectly aligned with how the system works. So basically, where you produce most power, we know when it's most realistic you're going to change gears, and it's going to grab the chain and put it on. At the same time, everywhere where this wrist is, that the one of the cogs is also smaller, which also grabs the chain much quicker.
Yeah, I noticed that's very clever, isn't it? So what you're saying is that you have those little cogs, and every now and then there's a little cog that's a bit smaller. And I've noticed that when I'm changing gears, whenever a cog is smaller, it immediately passes on to another chain ring, and it catches on the next big cog. So I think that's a very clever kind of little bit of engineering there. So
it is, and
that was on purpose, right? Because I thought one of the cogs was broken, and then I noticed.
No. We get that a lot. Yeah, if you would look at from the inside, the chaining from the inside, where the wrist is that grabs the chain, the cog that's smaller always is at the end of that wrist. It's to grab the chain, and that's why they actually make. Sometimes we do get feedback from clients that it shifts much better than the original round rings. Yeah, because some drivetrain manufacturers, their rings are not, let's say, optimal. Even in the original setup. So you could actually fix that one with oval chain rings as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for this. Thank you for talking to us. I'll continue testing them because I really like them, and I'll probably talk to you in the future so we can do a more advanced kind of thing, like a lecture on all things ovals or all things kind of cycling. So, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Nuno. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you. And yeah, I'm looking forward to get more of your feedback from testing.
Yeah. Cheers. So I really have to thank Borut because he's always been available to talk to me. And so regarding the science behind ovals or elliptical chain rings, I'll have another video on this, and perhaps I can invite Dr. Borut Fonda back because his PhD was in cycling biomechanics, so he'll no doubt have some valuable insights into this topic. So before I finish, I just want to talk a bit about the ovals, a bit my experience with these well, they're not ovals, they're actually elliptical, true elliptical chain rings. When I first tried these, I thought that there was going to be an adaptation period. Whether it was going to be long or short, I had no clue, but I thought that an adaptation period would be in store for me. And in actual fact, I felt nothing. Well, I shouldn't say I felt nothing. I felt immediately that my pedaling was less square and it was a lot more stable, it was a lot more round, but I was actually looking for a noticeable change, a noticeable stimuli that would induce a large temporal adaptation to these new rings, but I didn't feel any of that. I didn't feel any change in my technique. I didn't feel that there was even an adaptation needed. I was pedaling the same way, I was engaging the pedal in the same way. It was all very, very natural. Now, thinking back, the round chain rings felt right, okay? But I had no idea what different chain rings would feel because I'd only tried round chain rings, the round Shimano chain rings. These are round. So when I try these ones, they kind of feel more right than these ones, because now I know the difference between these ones and that ones, and the elliptical ones. And I'll be talking about the science behind oval and elliptical chain rings in another video. And Borut already alluded to some of these, to some aspects that I think are really important to talk about. But that's going to be in another video. Today, I just wanted to show you how easy it was to put these on. And I wanted to give you kind of a little glimpse of what we're going to discuss in another video. And hopefully I'm able to bring Borut back again to talk about these things. So that's it for me now. That's it for this video. Once again, thank you very much, Borut, for appearing in this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. This channel is all about science and making knowledge accessible. Ta-ra!